on council. And the topic this evening will be consideration of ratifying an award of a bid for trash and recycling service in the city of Mishawaka to our residential customers as recommended to us by the administration. This evening we'll be hearing from representatives of the administration as well as representatives of waste management regarding the services that they propose to provide to the community. So unless there are any additional questions or comments from the council at this point in time, we'll go ahead and open the floor for the administration to begin their proceeding, and we'll jump in with questions from there.
Well, good evening. I'm Chris Jamrose. I'm city engineer, and I'm at 100 West, Lincoln Way West. Got the right address again. Yes. So 30 years at the other one, it's just hard to do sometimes, you know. All right, Honorable President Hickson-Ball and council members, thank you for scheduling this informational meeting. As you're aware, we advertised and opened bids during the regular Board of Public Works and Safety meeting at 10 a.m. August 20th, 2024. It's the city's refuse collection, transportation, disposal, which has a project number of STP-24-001. The bids have the same level of service, which includes a senior discount. It proposes basic weekly collection, including a 1 96-gallon waste tote and 1 96-gallon recycled tote. You can still bundle your branches, and it's 2 large items every week. Notable changes, I guess you could say, between the 2008 bid and the bid that we just opened is yard waste. Yard waste today, the trash haulers do like to have it commingled with the waste. So that was consistent across the board between all bidders. So that is one notable change. We also had recyclables. The recyclables have changed even in the last 5 years, let alone last 16 since the previous bid. And, okay. And, okay. And at this point, we have traditional education and expanded education. These fine folks will submit and share more information on. That's part of the bid just because we know things are different today. And customer service, we've asked for expanded customer service, expanded hours for the call center, just to be more customer friendly. The bids were received from Board and Waste Away, from a Public Services of Indiana and Waste Management of Indiana. A bid summary was generated where there you see Table 1. I believe you all have that in your packet. Table 1 is everything described in its weekly recycling. Table 2 changes the recycling to bi-weekly, so that's 26 times a year. And it provides a comparison between all bids, just so that for your ease to take a look and contemplate which one you wanted to do. Upon extensive review, we did identify Waste Management, which you like to be called WM now, right? You're transitioning to that.
It's hard to do.
WM of Indiana also?
Yes.
Okay. They are the apparent lowest, most responsible and responsive bidder. And to assist in your consideration, they're here tonight to give you a presentation and answer any questions you have. I do believe Chantel is online. We're just going to open up for folks. Chantel, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Awesome. I'm going to step away. Go ahead.
Great. Council, thank you so much for having us tonight. I am coming to you virtually from the other state of Michigan. I've been working very closely with Chris and the team that we have with you present tonight as we have built this proposal for your consideration. As Chris mentioned, we've had quite a few conversations regarding some of the nominal changes that we are proposing as part of this contract. We understand that with waste comes a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings. People get very used to doing things the way that they've always done them. And while the changes that we are talking about are very small, it does take a little bit of hand-holding and a lot of education to get folks to a place of comfort with those changes. As Chris had mentioned, we've talked about a few different things that are going to help with getting folks to where they need to feel comfortable again. We have a very robust library of education as it refers to recycling as a whole. It's known as our Recycle Right campaign. So there's plenty of educational materials that we can circulate to the community just to help folks understand what is and isn't recyclable. As Chris mentioned, the market is changing. It is evolving a little bit as demand rises and falls. Part of that includes, things like the great pizza box debate, right? Can you recycle it? Can you not recycle it? So just some of those things that we see consistently coming up. The other part of that is some of our expanded customer experience offerings. In addition to a traditional call center, we also have an expanded offering of self-service tools. That includes access to an online platform called MyWM. Folks do have the option to create a profile, but they don't need to access. That gives them access to things such as their estimated time of arrival. If there were a missed collection, they could report a missed collection. If they have a cart that has a wonky wheel, they could report the need for a replacement or a repairment. Really an expanded service offering. We're trying, as the audience evolves, to give folks a channel of choice. So that includes online offerings, again, the traditional call center. We have an inbox that folks can also send an email to. And with that online offering, there's also an automated, more of an AI-focused chatbot, as well as a live agent chat function. So really trying to serve, the masses when it comes to connecting with us on any questions, concerns, or issues that they have to hopefully keep the phones at the city nice and quiet, right? That's the goal. The other piece, as we've talked about, is education. We are expanding our online offerings to include a local webpage, which is essentially a customized web page that can serve as a hub not only for the nuts and bolts of the contracts that WM and the City of Mishawaka have, but also, again, some of those educational resources. What can I recycle? If I'm putting a bulk item out, do 2 chairs equal 1 bulk item? Do I have to wrap something? Really just putting the resources in the hands of the residents so that they can be successful. We understand that trash is, it's something everybody creates. It's something everybody has to get rid of, but sometimes getting rid of it can be a little bit of a mystery. So we want to take some of that guesswork out of it for folks. Is there any particular questions or concerns from the council that I can address?
So before you do that, Chantel, I just want to introduce the team here. Again, thank you very much for your consideration in this contract. My name is Doug Reams. I am the area public sector manager for Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. I've been with WM, now Waste Management, or Waste Management, now WM, for 31 years. So we are excited about doing this and really having this transition go smoothly. Again, our experience has been in transitions to move these accounts similar to your community and make it smooth and easy as process. In part of our proposal, in addition to all the local web pages, expanded customer service, and all the other things that Chantel outlined, we will work with your team and staff here to develop a transition plan. We put that part of our proposal as kind of a draft transition plan, but we will outline that and work on that together. So that's really the ultimate goal here, is to make it smooth and transition-free for your residents and for this community. With me, I also have Dave Wainscott. Dave Wainscott is newly into this role, and he will be your point person from this point forward for this contract. Dave has been with the company now for over 5 years in another role, managing our commercial industrial base, now transitioning over to the public sector and residential side. We also have Austin. Austin is our district manager here. He's located in South Bend, but manages this whole entire area and manages all the trucks and facility and assets that have inside of this area for this contract. Austin, and part of this contract is, if awarded, we'll be transitioning our trucks over to CNG, compressed natural gas, and we will run quieter, more efficient, and really less costly and a sustainable function. We're moving away from diesel and moving more to compressed natural gas in all of our vehicles throughout WM. So that's part of the proposal and part of that initiative that we'll be putting forth here for the city of Mishawaka. So with that, I'll open it up for questions, and we'll be glad to answer any of the questions you or the council may have.
Mrs. Volker.
Thank you. I just had a quick one. I just needed to clarify the yard waste. How is that handled? Because right now we just put it in the bin. Is
Yeah.
that not going to be the same?
Nope, it'll be the same as it is today. So
Oh,
we'll
okay.
transition the same way. There's a little confusion on the bid, but ultimately here in Indiana, we can commingle that and take it to the landfill.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
I'll probably have more, but give me a minute.
We're here.
Ms. Hahn.
Be glad to answer.
I think you mentioned several times a website. Do you guys have an app, or do you plan on ever implementing an app?
We do have an app too, so it's
Okay.
mobile-based as well as desktop-based.
Okay.
So residents can actually go onto WM.com. They can actually put in their address, and from that point forward, they'll be able to get ETAs or estimated time that will be there, their service days. So if the council elects to go to every other week service, as an example for recycling, they'll actually see the service day that we're going to collect it. So they won't have to worry about whether it's odd week or even week or what have you. So that's one example of it. In addition to that, if there's a cart that gets a bad wheel or the lid gets broken for some reason, based to just normal wear and tear use, they can put in a ticket to do that. That automatically goes into Austin's team, and Austin's team will then exchange that cart, and it'll give them the estimated time and give them a ticket number and confirmation when we complete it. So all that happens either desktop or mobile version.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Evans.
Thank you. Looking at your table here, table 1, this trash with yard waste plus weekly recyclable. Will you only pick up or dump just two containers?
2 containers, yes. That was the way we responded to the RFP was 1 container for trash and 1 container for recycling.
Okay. What happens if you have 3?
If you have 3, there's an additional cost for those additional containers, but the ultimate goal was to have 1 container for both trash and recycling.
Well, I run into a problem. I have too much grass and trash that I can't get it all in 1 container. So I have one just for yard waste and that.
Okay. We can do that, and I think that's what we'll have to work with Chris on, making sure that we have those examples and those situations identified.
Okay. Now, do you furnish the container?
We do.
So then I can request 2 large and 1 recycle?
Yep, you can. That can be done through that. We will be working with, and again, if awarded the contract, we're working with a third-party company called Cascade Engineering. They are our vendor for carts, and their carts are eco carts. They're made from recycled material. And what we'll work together with your team to deploy those carts, develop a staging area, and disperse those carts throughout all of Mishawaka. So we'll have that very seamless process. In addition to that, for our cart vendor that delivers the carts, they have an online system that also do an RFID tag on each cart, so we know where it was delivered and when it was delivered. So there's some verification. So for example, if you have residents who are snowbirds that are away for the winter time, because this is when the start of the contract is, which is January, we will identify that and have verification that the container was delivered and where it was delivered to.
Got another question is, do you have front-end dumpsters or is it overhead? You don't?
We will be deploying, actually, we're going to be deploying ASLs, which is automated side load containers. So with those, the actual cart will be delivered and dumped on top, which will be on the side of each one of our trucks.
To miss your point, you said on the side,
Correct.
it'll dump into something on the side of your truck?
No, it'll dump to the top of the truck, but
Okay.
the actual collection of the arm will actually be jettisoned
Okay.
from the side
Okay.
and then go up. We found with those systems, a couple of reasons why we use that system. Less spillage. When you have something that's in the front where it goes in the top, it has less spillage and less opportunity to spill. And number two, it's much more efficient for our drivers to continue to do that. We've gone to automated system, and I'm sure you've heard this in many other cases, but what we've done with an automated system, we've been able to expand our driver pool so we can have lots of different diversity in our driver pool. So we have lots of opportunities to continue to have people in place. So we don't have those labor shortages that other haulers may have. It's a difficult job. We want to make sure that we keep people sustainable. We've also really tried to identify and make sure we incentivize our employees to do that. We are offering education for free for their families, so they can go online and actually do an education for continued education, not only for their homes, for their family, but also their kids. So we are trying to compete with the world, as you know, to try to figure out how do we keep labor in place and make sure that we continue to service these communities
The
sustainably.
reason I asked that question is because we had a number of times in my neighborhood, when they dump it, they just a free fall and the stuff flies out all
Yep.
over the street, and then they leave it.
Sure.
Now, does your company, with the driver, does he stop and pick up that trash that he did not dump properly?
Yes. The whole goal of our driver and our staff is really to make sure that we leave the city clean. And with that, if they identify that they had spillage, our drivers are required to pick up that material.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Before I go to Mr. Mamalenti, I do want to note for the record that two of our colleagues are participating online. Mr. Carroll, Matt Carroll, and Ron Benicki are both online, so they may be jumping in with some remote questions as well. But Mr. Mamalenti?
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple questions for myself and also those that are watching online. Regarding the mobile access, whether it's via app or on the desktop, I know in years past, there's always questions that arise. Nobody can remember it's trash pickup on Memorial Day, Labor Day, et cetera. Do you have access for those that would prefer sign up for push notifications, whether it's via text or phone, that will allow them no trash tomorrow on holiday, et cetera, will be pushed back an additional day?
Absolutely. As Chantel alluded to earlier, there's a MyWM app where customers or residents can actually sign up and put a profile in place.
Okay.
And in doing so, they can actually put notifications, their recommended way they want to be communicated with, whether you text, email, or the phone call. So for those instances where we have, for example, if we had a snow day that was where we weren't able to pick up the trash because of weather-related issues, we have the ability to push a notification out to residents and make sure that everybody's aware. We're trying to minimize the calls that come into your community and ultimately inform the residents of what's happening on the street.
And then the next question is scheduling. For example, my trash and recycling gets picked up on Mondays. Is it your goal to kind of mirror and keep that same route to make
think,
it as
yeah,
easy as possible for our
Yeah,
residents?
working with Chris and team, we've identified that we're going to keep the days of service the same. So we're not going to disrupt that at this point. You know, that may look different down the road, but for right now, in the initial start of this contract, our proposal is to keep the service days the same.
And then to piggyback off Mr. Emmons' questions regarding its pickup, the contract is for one bin of trash, one bin of recycling. What if on a holiday, et cetera, I know a lot of my neighbors, their bin gets filled up and they have bags around. Is that to be picked up as well, or is it whatever's in the bin gets picked up?
On those rare occasions that you have extra trash, our drivers are relatively accommodating within reason, of course. But yeah, if you have those rare occasions, we'll pick up the material outside the car.
Okay.
If it's a consistent problem, then we're going to probably contact the city and the resident to ensure that we get a second card.
And then in terms of recycling, I know you guys had mentioned, and I understand the commodity market changes, and what's in demand, what's not, what's great. If a resident, including myself, I'm sure I do it quite often, put something in there that's not of recycling material, does it go through the line and does it get picked out and then goes to the landfill, or how does
No.
that process work?
Really, the process there in that situation where we have information that's put in there, or material that's put in the cart that's incorrect, we will try to notify or communicate with the resident to improve it. So it's really about education not about not throwing things out. We understand there's going to be situations where there are issues of contamination, but ultimately we're trying to educate the residents of the proper way to put material in the car.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's it for now.
Mrs. Volker?
Thank you. Just to follow up on the whole yard waste thing, I also have a very large yard. So we end up having a lot of extra grass. So it doesn't fit in the bin, and frankly, I hate it in the bin because it's nasty. So if you have, you know, the recyclable bags with yard waste, will you pick those up? Or do you charge us extra, or how do you do that?
I
Because
think
it's
it's-
gonna happen, not just
Yeah,
with me, anybody
sure.
who has big
I think we'll have
yards.
to identify that with Chris. I think, you know, part of our proposal was in those instances where we had large events that happen, we will pick up those material. But we'll identify that with Chris, but I understand that we'll probably pick those up if it's a large one event item.
It would be all summer.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know, Chris,
Yeah.
we'll have to probably talk about that.
So can you give us an example? So pizza boxes, you know, the dirty pizza boxes, I understand my husband's always really careful about that, but what are other recyclables that I think I can put in now that I shouldn't be putting in?
One of the bigger issues that is always an opportunity to transition is plastic bags. So again, it's all different in every community, but plastic bags are problematic as they go into our waste stream and go into our recycling centers. What they do is they ruin the material and ruin the equipment that's out there. For the most part, as long as it's in the recycle right on part of our proposal, that's acceptable. You know, pizza boxes are always one of the problematic items when they have greasy and stuff that's contaminated. I think mostly, for the most of the residents here, I think they'll find that it's pretty easy to recycle. There's nothing, I don't think, that's going to be out of the norm.
Mrs. Hazen?
So I know currently, we have leaf pickup in the city of Mishawaka, and they do allow people to put, I believe it's 10 bags of leaves during leaf season. Are we not going to be able to do that anymore? Not that I have them, but I know residents do,
Sure.
so.
I think we have to take that case by case. I know Chantel, I know
Okay.
you're my lifeline here, and just to make sure we got everything covered.
Yeah, it is my understanding that the leaf collection is executed by the city. And that is something that would continue. We would be available to assist with, again, some of those larger parcels where you have excess grass and some of those pieces.
Other questions? Mr. Viola?
Thank you, Mr. President. To follow up with Mr. Emmons' question, you said, he had stated that he might need a second container, and you said that wouldn't be a problem, but would that be a charge to him if you wanted 3 containers instead of 2, you know, maybe 2 trash ones and 1 recycle, or 2 recycles and 1 trash?
Yeah, as part of our proposal, we put in there that, you know, 1 cart, 1 container is really the cost. If there's additional carts that are required, there would be additional cost.
It would be an additional cost. And the other issue was, you said that you'd have website, app notification, the push notifications, then a phone call. Would that be like a robocall to everybody saying, hey, we're not picking up trash today? If they didn't sign up for the app and they didn't sign up for the web, a lot of people aren't going to be tech savvy. So is there going to be a robocall to everybody?
Yeah, we have 2 different ways in which to communicate. One is a robocall that identifies those residents where we have their addresses, we have their phone numbers, so we can certainly do that. Then the push notification process is really for those that sign up online. And we can share those stats with you all the time of how many residents are signed up online and what are we doing and executing online and what's our delivery expectations compared to what the service standards are for online service.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Emmons?
No, thank you. Going back to the third receptacle, what would be that charge? Is it a,
Chantel, I don't know if we outlined that in our proposal. I was just going to make sure I have the right numbers before I say something that I'm not supposed to.
do you have that?
I'm picking it up right now, Doug.
Okay.
So I will get back to you, Mr.
Okay.
Emmons.
Anything else, Wade?
Pardon?
Anything else?
No, I just didn't understand when she butted in. I don't know what she said.
She said she's going to get
So
back
wait,
to us with
she's
specific
looking it up right
information.
now in our
Yep.
proposal.
Thank you.
Mrs. Polk.
Thank you. So, sorry, I told you be more than one.
No, it's fine.
So just curious about education. You know, how do you plan on, well, I guess my specific question is, will you be mailing information to every household so that they understand that a change is happening, this is the timeline, this is what you can expect, this is who you call, this is the schedule, these are the recyclables that are accepted, these are the that are not accepted, here's how you handle your yard waste, you know, all that stuff.
Sure.
Not just like in print, send it to people.
So we have a couple different ways in which we communicate with residents. Certainly the one is to mail a mailer to everybody. We have a secondary vehicle where we do cart hangers. So as we deliver the cart, we put a cart hanger on there and it gives them some kind of FAQ facts about what's expected. And then thirdly is really social media. So we have, as Chantel alluded to, we have a whole kind of communications team that's available for you and for Mishawaka that we can work with your team to develop those kind of ways in which to communicate.
So just a little bit of a follow-up, and this kind of goes back to a few years, but will your pickups all be street pickups, nothing in alleys?
Correct. Yeah, our expectation is we're going to pick up at the curb.
Okay, thank you.
I had a follow-up to that, Mr. President. Do you have a second?
Mr. Carroll.
Thank you. I have a number of houses in my district where getting to the curb, whether it's school parking or, you know, a 5-foot drop, is pretty much impossible for those with mobility issues or the elderly. So we have had alley pickups for those for as long as we've had this. What's the solution for those folks?
I think we'll work with your team to really kind of identify those areas in which we can pick up and maybe come to a solution, whether it be the current way it's serviced today or on an alternate. But, you know, we'll work with you, and we understand that there are senior citizens, elderly, disabled, that will be out there in every community. And we work together to make sure we have an equitable solution and make sure we pick up those residents.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Mrs. Hazen?
Do you know the old bins, when they would be picking the, I mean, is that going to correlate pretty well together? Or?
We're going to do our best. How's that?
Yeah.
Certainly, I think what we'll do is work together with your team to work together with Republic and collect those materials. But, you know, we'll work together to make sure we have a smooth transition. So our hope is they'll pick it up and collect the cart as we're delivering the cart. So we're going to share our schedule and share everything we're going to do with the current provider to help kind of smooth that transition out.
And is the recycling cart and the trash cart going to look different like they currently do?
They do. So we
Okay.
have both the body of the carts are going to be green, and the recycle cart top or the lid will be yellow.
Okay.
So yes. Now, Chantel, I don't know if you found the, we may have to get.
Yeah, so the cost proposal did not require establishing a rate for that additional cart. We have a kind of a standard that we typically look at for how we set those rates. So we're happy to work with Chris and team to establish that rate. It is a reduced rate from what the monthly rate is that's established. It's typically between 70 to 80% of what the monthly unit rate is, and that includes the cost of the cart as well as the ongoing service.
Thank you for that additional information. A couple comments and questions as well. First of all, I appreciate the information that you have all shared with us, and I was impressed by your response to the RFP and the detail that you put into that response, so thank you for that as well. I like a lot of what I've read and I've heard. What was very important to me throughout this process is that customer service component that you touched on. Number one, I think that right now, our staff, both Mr. Ryan and then our line staff at our municipal utilities department, are fielding too many phone calls that I believe should be fielded by the vendor. And it sounds like you would agree with me on that, and you have a plan in place to address that, so I appreciate that. And then the ease of working through service issues for our customers, I appreciate your comments and your information on that as well. Right now, I think that our end users are having to chase down too many people on too many phone calls for too many issues, when to me, as a layperson, it seems like it ought to be one-stop shopping. And I get the sense from the nodding of the head that you would agree with that the more that we can make ease of administration and working through those issues, it's in everybody's mutual best interest. I also like the fact that you were willing to work with us to talk about a different renewal cycle moving forward. We've touched on the fact that December 31st, January 1st is the transition period here. And I think early on in this process, both council and administration identified a midsummer time frame to be much more conducive to a positive outcome for our residents. And I suspect it's a better time of year for you to have to work through those issues as well. So I appreciate that. And I look forward to continuing the conversation, but what I'm starting to become a little bit concerned about is that, not in any great degree on any great issue, but I feel like on a number of the issues that my colleagues have asked you questions about, that there is going to be heartburn and heartache on the part of our residents when the habits that they have been accustomed to over the course of not just 4 years, but 15 plus or minus years, that now in one fell swoop that they're going to have to make some adjustments, whether it's a different type of bagging, purchasing additional carts, having somebody tell them that it's okay to put these extra bags out this time, but now it's not. I think we need to go into this process with a commitment to being fair to you, but we also have to be fair to our residents. And it's probably overstating it to say that it's a concern, but I'm starting to get a feeling here that there are some issues on the horizon as part of this transition. So not necessarily this evening, but I'm hopeful that you can help at least me work through some of that angst and identify how we're going to work through, first of all, identify what those transition issues are going to be. And more so than even sharing that with us, as part of that education, I think that with as much detail as is possible, identifying for our residents that I used to be able to put my leaves out in a hefty bag, but now I have to use a brown recyclable bag. I don't even know where I would go buy one of those right now. So I'm sure you've been down this road before time and time again, but I think between now and the time that we approve this contract, that as much of that educational material as you can put together, that would at least be helpful to me, and I suspect my colleagues would like to see some of that as well.
Yeah, we'd be more than happy to help with any communication and transition plan. Like you mentioned, we've done this in years past, and I'll give you an example of one that was probably the bigger change for any community. It was a community that was 31,000 homes, who was manual collection without carts. And they had to communicate to the residents, and we helped them with that program to get to a point where they had to go carts. That's a huge transition, as you can imagine, for somebody who was a 25-year resident in that community that was able to put out anything they wanted to every week. It was unlimited contract, it was manual, and it was a little 18-gallon bin for recycling. So we helped the community, we developed communication, we worked together with that community to kind of transition and make sure that communication steps were in place to make that huge transition of the residents that were in that community. So, today, they certainly had some, heartburn over the front side of it, but looking back a year or 6 months later, the residents were very happy, and quite honestly, they could never think they could live without the cart that they had today. So it does happen with some transition. Certainly there's going to be some transitionary points, as you all know, but ultimately we have the people in place to help with some of those transitions and communications that will help.
I appreciate that. And I agree with you 100%. It would be unrealistic for us to expect that there will be zero transition issues. Anytime you make any change of along the lines of what we're talking about, it's inevitable. But thank you for those comments. I also want to go back to your exchange with Mr. Emmons with regard to things that happen in the ordinary course of business, and whatever, however, something drops out of the can or out of the lift or out of the bin and it ends up on the street. And I appreciate that comment that it sounds like you have a corporate expectation that your drivers are going to be very diligent about following up on that. But other than the training and the onboarding that you do and, reemphasizing that over the course of one's career, what's your quality control mechanism for making sure that that actually is taking place in the field on a proactive basis rather than having to rely on one of our residents to call and report it?
Great question. I'll let Austin kind of outline a little bit more detail with it, but in the WM trucks, we have 9 cameras on every truck. So we have 9 cameras that are sitting in the truck. We have, first and foremost, we have a front-facing camera that's really called drive cam, which is really for the safety of the employee and safety for coaching. So if there's an event, he or she had to stop fast or got in some sort of critical accident, we have the ability to videotape that and run that back. It's not only for protection for the driver and for the community, but also for coaching to ensure that our drivers are safe on the road. We have a hopper cam, which is the material that goes into the top of the hopper that has a camera that goes onto it. We have a side cam, we have a house cam, we have a rear-facing cam, and we have a front-facing camera. So all those cameras are in place to help us ensure that, one, we will share with the resident those videos in case that happens. For example, if a resident said, didn't pick me up, we all have those situations, we all know that. We have the video that'll show when we picked it up and the video of the home and if the cart was out or not. We additionally have that cart that's available, and if there's material that's spread out, Austin and his team utilize a system called Third Eye that actually will look at the video of that thing, and it'll show the sequence of the driver when he or she is in that area. So we have the way to GPS track our drivers and hold them accountable to those types of situations that are out there. I don't know, Austin, if you want to share anything else. I think I could probably start.
Sorry, very nicely done. There's also a team that does daily auditing. So here locally, our ops specialist, Kelly, she kind of keeps everything sane here for us. But she goes through, and then there's a remote team also that audits every lift per day. So there's an additional kind of set of eyes in the sky that reports back to the site. Again, big on the coaching opportunity piece. If and when it were to happen, how do we keep it from happening again with that driver, whatever it might be, as well as root causing. Is it a technical issue with the truck? We sort of kind of deep dive from there when we have those issues. But I mean, the drivers, the team knows that those are being audited daily, the expectation, the training, and honestly, the relationships our drivers build with the customers on the day-to-day, they don't want that trash to be out there for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, things like that. So as far as the validating one thing or another, it is all based around that Third Eye system. I mean, in the current day right now, we're not getting, I'd say maybe we've had one instance in the last couple of months specifically, and it ended up being a mechanical issue that we let our technician team address, and we're there. So the system does work. It's kind of fascinating to watch, but then there's that back-end team that takes care of it because it is a lot of sifting through lifts every single day. So we just want to know where those are and when those happen so that we can address it with the drivers and the teams here locally.
I appreciate that. Just out of curiosity, is your workforce, and in particular, are your drivers unionized?
We are not unionized on the hauling side. Negative.
Okay. One of the things that we haven't, we've talked a lot about service for obvious reasons. That's a very important component of what we're talking about here. But pricing is also, I assume, going to be discussed at some point this evening. One preliminary question that I have is with regard to the two tables, the two alternatives on pricing that have been presented to us. With regard to biweekly recycling as opposed to weekly recycling, within your industry and in particular within the Midwest, is there any trend line with regard to weekly versus biweekly? Are we in the norm to have weekly, or is it a different circumstance?
We are seeing more communities go to a biweekly service or every other week service with the larger cart, with the 96-gallon cart, like you have here in Mishawaka. So we're seeing that for a couple of reasons. One, from a cost perspective, and once residents get used to it and get used to that service, that's what they've been more accustomed to. We still have many communities that are going weekly. We understand that, but we're seeing more and more of the trends to go to biweekly. For one, sustainability issues, less wear and tear on your roads, less emissions that we may have, which obviously will be CNG here, so the emissions will be less anyway. But ultimately, it's your choice and the choice of what you think the residents will adopt quickly. we understand some of the changes. To go to a bi-weekly program would be another change for the residents. But we can do both.
Thank you. And then jumping back to those transition and service issues, in your experience, and I'm asking this question sincerely, are there any transition issues that we should expect that we'll experience here in Mishawaka that we haven't asked you about to this point in time that you feel that we should be aware of?
I think as long as we have an address list and where all the containers and carts are gonna go, where we find they're, in some instances, in some cities, they may not have the most accurate address list on the onset of our delivery of equipment. So what we find is that residents are calling in because they weren't on a list and we didn't deliver the cart. So I would be prepared for that, and just as we work together as a team, make sure that we have the most accurate list we can get, and we'll validate the delivery of those carts. So, you know, based on what I talked about earlier, we have a third-party vendor that does that and make sure that we have all the carts delivered. That's probably the bigger challenge we faced, in not having the correct information for the number of homes and service addresses.
Understandable. Well, gentlemen, Chantel, thank you for your patience with me. I appreciate the information. Mrs. Volker?
I'm sorry, I have another question. I just have a big yard, so I have to use myself as an example. With yard waste, will you pick up like the trash cans that you buy at Lowe's with grass in them, or, you know, whatever, yard waste in them? Will you pick those up, or will you want everything in the brown paper bags? Will you, what will you want, and how will you communicate that? Because I'm not the only one. I see it all the time. People have, extra trash cans. They have them in their garage, and they fill them up, and frankly, our current provider takes them. They might throw the bin around a little bit, but they take them. So what's gonna, what are your thoughts on that?
I think our thoughts right now are we will do our best to pick up that material. We'd like it probably in bags right now, because as we talked about earlier, we're gonna utilize the automated side loader, so we're not gonna have anything for the driver to lift. So therefore, we prefer it in bags.
So the side loader would be able to pick up a bag, but they wouldn't be able to pick up
They'll
the random Lowe's bin?
Yeah, they'll have to put back in the material into the cart and pick up the cart.
Oh.
Yeah,
So they'll have to get out and put it in the cart, and then the cart will, or the machine
nuances
will?
like that, yeah.
Ah,
Correct.
okay.
Correct.
Okay, that is gonna be some education, not just for me, that's gonna, because right now, God bless them, they manually dump those
Yeah.
containers.
And ultimately, one of the reasons why we're going to automation and what we're doing is we're trying to eliminate failures and workman comp issues.
Injuries, right.
You can understand injuries. And it's very difficult to find someone in this environment to pick up 10 tons of material a day. That's really if you think about a manual system, if you do that every day, it's 10 tons of material every day that person's picking up. And those are hard people to find, and hard people to find long-term to pick up that all the time. So that's why we're trying to get to an automated system the best we can.
That will require education.
Sure. We understand that?
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, please, thank you. You're saying all your containers are 96 gallons, right?
Correct.
Now, we have a number of people, especially in my area, that are elderly, and those big gallon 96 are tough for them to handle. So right now, they have smaller containers to help them get those out to the curb. And do you have smaller containers for the elderly people?
We do. So we have, upon request, we can provide a 64-gallon cart.
Okay. Now, can anybody ask for a smaller one? Like I got one large one and two smaller ones.
Okay.
And because I store them in the garage, and a lot of people do that. And you find that you get the 96, those are sometimes hard to store unless you leave them outside. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, with the onset of the contract, as we deliver the carts, we'll deliver 96-gallon carts for every resident within inside of Mishawaka. What we ask is for them to try it and have a trial period. And then if they require a smaller cart, they can call in and we can swap that out. for
I
a
just
smaller-
know we have a number of residents, in the past, we've had that problem where they can't handle, especially in the wintertime, that they can't get it out to the curb.
Sure.
And especially if they're elderly and they're living by themselves, especially the young ladies, try to get that bin out to the curb. And
Yeah, we understand those instances that occur. We deal with them all the time with, like I said earlier, elderly or disabled individuals. We will work together with the city to make sure we identify those and work together to get a smaller cart if that's required.
what gallon are those smaller ones?
They're 64 gallon,
64?
correct.
Okay, that's what I have then. I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
know
the
what it-
smallest one that we can actually collect with the automated arms. Anything different than that is really 64 and 96 are the two opportunities that we have.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Bevelanti?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just going back to my earlier question regarding recycling, and I know I've heard the education standpoint thrown around quite a bit this evening. Just looking through the brochure that you had handed out, which I greatly appreciate, it kind of explains on page 54 the items that are acceptable for recycling. So I guess my concern is to make a decision. I know I don't have to do it this evening, but whether it's recycling every week or bi-weekly, we determine on what's allowed and what is not allowed. And based on the information that you provided, is all things that I've been recycling, so I feel good in compliance at this point. And I know mine's full almost every week. And if it gets to the point where it's full, instead of putting it in my trash, I just kind of hold it in my garage until the next week, et cetera. And I know my district or my area, I would say 90% of them are full as well. So that's my concern is, you know, if there are items that we're recycling that shouldn't be, is bi-weekly adequate if we're actually recycling the items that should be recycling and so forth. I just have a feeling that if it's bi-weekly, you know, once that gets full, it's just gonna go into the trash bin.
Sure.
And then I think we all kind of miss out on that. So that's just kind of my question. I almost think that the education should come prior to the decision, in my opinion, that I need that information before going to either weekly or bi-weekly. So if we could get any information or documents in more detail, that'd be greatly appreciated. So that's just my only concern.
Sure,
So,
understand.
thank you.
Yep, you can certainly do that. So yeah, the education piece is going to be critical here, and you know, it's the council's choice whether they elect to go weekly or bi-weekly. And we understand that, you know, bi-weekly, depending upon size of family and number of people in the family, it may squeeze that, you know, likelihood that you're going to have some overflow or some opportunity for excess that goes to the trash. So really, we're prepared to do weekly, either way, on weekly or bi-weekly. So we're prepared to do either.
Those will
either
be two
solution.
different trucks?
There are different trucks for the trash and recycling, yes,
So truck dedicated for trash, truck dedicated for recycling.
correct.
And is it pretty standard for them to kind of stay within, kind of follow each other as best they can?
I'll let Austin pick that up.
It's depending.
I'm sorry, could you stand by the microphone so the folks can
Yeah,
hear us?
it is depending, just in the world, you know, the logistical piece, things happen in the morning, a flat tire before they head out of the yard could set them back. If they broke down the day before and there's still recycling on, do they need to go to the recycling to essentially dispose of that so they can get on route and still be able to service the amount of customers in a single load or what that looks like? So ideally, it'll be a routinely route essentially every week, but I wouldn't necessarily promise that they'd be following each other, just with some variables in there.
Okay, and while you're on the floor regarding you'd mentioned that your new trucks will be moving to or transition to compressed gas. And pardon my ignorance on this, I may have been sleeping during chemistry, but for frigid temperatures, is that better or?
So we've actually started to deploy this whole transition from diesel to CNG, natural gas. We're about 1.5 years in. As we're continuing to grow business, our fleet, I think we only have one diesel truck left right now. We've seen no areas of opportunity in regards to mileage constraints, distance, things like that. We actually prefer the CNG in the colder mornings. They seem to start up a lot better than some of our older diesel fleet did. But in regards to any issues, I think our coldest day was -32 wind chill last year. We were learning along the way the last year and a half, honestly, as well. Our technicians, our fleet team, the ops team, we were trying to figure this out. Like I said, I think June of 2023, we had our first truck on the road. So concerns, issues, items there, I wouldn't have any at all. I'd trust it over a diesel personally. And it's kind of fun to watch the newer trucks roll out on the road. So no concerns there in regards to temperature, hot or cold, spacing. I mean, they're just big trucks still, so no concerns on my end.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Another question.
Mrs. Boger.
Sorry, I was just looking at this page 54, I hadn't, or 56, I guess. I hadn't gone through this until Mr. Mammalani pointed it out. And here you have 3 different options. You have an organics truck, a recycling truck, and a trash truck. And of course, we're not talking about an organics cart, I'm sorry. So would there actually be, this is not my question, but would there actually be 3 different trucks for these 3 different containers?
No, there's actually 2 different trucks. The 3 different trucks we put in were just examples in some other proposals that we have. We have, in some contracts, we have a separate organics or compost truck,
And does, oh, okay.
primarily in Michigan. So again, it's really in Michigan, the law is organics or yard waste can go to landfill.
Oh,
So we have to, and we're required to, take another material type and take it to a compost facility. So that's why we put it in our proposals just as an option.
so, but in our case, I can put a rotten tomato in the trash truck?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, just want to clarify that.
Yeah, as an additional note of clarification, sorry, voice, it's hard to make myself known. I don't exactly know if I'm a floating head or not. But the pages that you're referencing also are kind of a sample guide of what some of the materials that we would put together in anticipation of the rollout of the contract. So while there's a variety of information in there, please note that the content is not specific to Mishawaka. It's just an example of what that material might look like.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll customize the material to, obviously with your approval.
Other questions? Mr. Emmons?
Oh, thank you. Right now, our present service has routes. I don't know how many routes there are in the city. And are you going to use the same routes, same number of routes that are currently being used?
I'm not familiar with how many routes they had. I know we provided service for the 14,000 homes that are here serviced in Mishawaka that will adequately be able to pick up the service on those service days. I don't know how many how many trucks did we have in this contract? Chantel, maybe you have it, or Austin has it.
The reason I'm asking the question is I never know when our trash is going to be picked up and recycling. They're both set out at the same time but one time they'll pick up the recycling real early, next time it's dark. Same thing with trash. And so I was just wondering if you're going to have a smaller route that you can pick up these carts or tubs or whatever you want to say and dump them where people can bring them in at a decent time.
Yeah, I think what we'll do, and as we establish the routes, we'll be more consistent on approach. Ultimately, I think what we would need to communicate to the residents, there's a service day expectation, not a time expectation. But once we get more comfortable with the routes, they'll be more time efficient in what we're going to be doing. I will tell you right now, we're not going to pick up at night. That's certainly not the case. We want to be safe on the streets.
You have hours that you work just like, say, from 7 or 6 or something to 6 or something?
Correct. Yeah, that's our service time. I think that was outlined in the RFP. That was 6 to 6 was our service time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, in looking at the number of routes, we are looking at 3.5 routes for trash and 2 routes. That's every day for recycle. Obviously, that will change a little bit depending on if we do biweekly or weekly service. But the intention is to provide as consistent of service as possible for folks, knowing, as Austin had alluded to, that, you know, it's Michigan, weather does happen. Every now and again, somebody might get a flat tire or something like that. But the goal is to be there consistently and, of course, on the service day as expected.
Make sure you're talking, this is Indiana.
I got another follow-up. I'm so sorry. So it's so interesting that you would say you have 3.5 routes for trash and only 2 routes for recycling. And I know I put my recycling out every week, whether it's a full bin or it's not a full bin. So to me, having 2 routes for recycling and 3.5 routes for trash, you're gonna have a hard time.
Not necessarily. We put the routes together based on the tonnage that the Mishawaka City provided us, and we back into those tonnages to develop how many routes and how many trucks we need. So again, I don't know what the participation rate is here in Mishawaka, but you know, historically in many communities, it's probably 32 to 35%. So 35% of the residents will be putting out recyclables compared to 100% will put out trash. So that's really why we developed that system in place, 3 on trash and 2 on recycling. But all that was based on the calculation provided in the information from the city of Mishawaka.
So just to follow up on that, if you find that it is a 60% participation rate every week, does that, what does that do to the contract? Do you adjust to the contract? In other words, do you adjust to that usage without?
We add trucks.
Okay, so it's not going to impact the contract. Okay.
Contract is the contract of what we provided in our RFP response. If the participation rate goes greater, that's fantastic. Probably what we'll see then is a reduction in trash. So there'll be a correlation there. If recycling participation increases, trash production will decrease.
Okay, all right, thank you. I swear I'm done.
No, that's fine.
Famous last words,
We're
Mrs.
glad.
Walker, famous last words. Any other questions? Feeling?
I'm not sure if this question should be to you or to Chris. Reading the letter from Chantel about the second paragraph saying that it brings the rate to the alternate down to 1650 and 1320, and the graph that we have says it was 1750 and 1420. So I guess I noticed that the table 1 is also off. I think it's 80 cents. Is that correct? Did something get mixed up? Or I guess I'm not sure, Chris or Chantel, what I'm looking at.
Chantel did make an error in, that's what she was clarifying.
Okay.
Okay, so we did the adjustments. So you're looking at the adjustments, okay?
Okay.
Because of her letter, okay? Well, you're also seeing that this table includes our fee to bill.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Other questions? Then I also have one more. We talked about quality control and what happens when trash ends up on the street, you know, through no fault of anybody involved. When I think back, actually, the majority of the complaints that I've ever received from residents have to do with totally missed service, not as much the trash that's left on the ground. So things happen, and even with all the processes and procedures that you have in place, things undoubtedly are going to happen. So what would be the expectation for a resident who has their trash or recycling missed on day 1? When should they expect to see a WM truck arrive in front of their house to pick up their refuse?
As part of the response to the RFP, and keep me honest here, Chris and Chantel, but our expectation was to pick up the next day or within 24 hours to pick up that material. And again, with coaching and call center, we have that video footage. We're not certainly going to argue with residents, but we'll certainly inform and make sure that the material is out on time.
Fantastic, thank you. Anything else?
President.
Go
Is Tim going to speak, Tim Ryan, or not planning on it?
Let's let them get through their schedule of
Thank you.
speakers, and then we can pepper Mr. Ryan for questions before we get out of here.
Sorry, Tim.
Anything else for us, folks?
No, thank you very much, and we appreciate the consideration, and we look forward to starting the contract.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All of you, thank you. All right, anything else from the administration? What I feel that we haven't talked about enough is the proposed rates that are going to feed into this. So could somebody step to the podium and clarify for us and compare and contrast what our residents are currently paying versus what's being proposed moving forward?
Absolutely. The current rate, that is just the non-senior, so the current basic general person like me, I would be paying with the current for public services, it's $15.66 a month. If you're a senior, you would be at the $12.74 a month. If you were to choose the same level of service where your recycling is every week, and you want to choose the average over the life of the contract, so that means the dollar value per month stays the same for the 5 years and 6 months, you would go to $21.69 for a basic non-senior rate, and the senior rate would be $17.55. If you wanted to choose to do the recycling bi-weekly, so it's 26 weeks out of the whole year, your basic non-senior rate is $19.07, and the senior residential is $15.46. That includes the fee for billing from our utilities.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions with regard to the financial component, Mrs. Volker?
Thank you. So so the proposal will be that we will not ramp it up from 2025 to 2030. We will begin, or the entire life of the contract, we'll be charging $21.69 a month.
That is really for you to discuss, consider. The previous,
Just say it.
this goes back to Mayor Buter. Mayor Buter had felt that it was easier to do the same value across the contract than it was to have an increment every year, because you're always going up, and the percent, it's just painful for a lot of people. So they had it for the life of the contract. So I did the same thing because it goes back that far. I guess I am that old.
Not a senior yet, but
I'm getting close. We have the alternate. You can do increments every year. You can see the WM has, if you had the first year in 2025, you'd be $19.89. And then the next year in 26, it would go to $20.65. Then 21.41, 22.24, 23.10, 23.99. If you took all of those rates and you averaged it over the 66 months, that's how you get the $21.69. So you could increment throughout the contract, or you can choose to just do the average and stay consistent for the whole contract.
And then what do we do with the excess that we're being paid? Do we invest that? Or if the city's charging $21.69, but our actual fee is $19.90, $19 whatever, are we investing the difference, or are we paying Waste Management that flat
The
fee
flat
over
fee,
5 years?
yeah, it's
or-
gonna, it will be, if
WM.
you choose the flat fee, that's what they'll bill per how many units
To the city?
to the city.
Okay.
Okay, so they get paid more on the front end, but they've got all this investment on the front end. And then they lose, sorry, but you do lose money on the back end. That's the average, which honestly, Mayor Buter was ahead of his time as usual. I have found when I've talked to other places that this is becoming the norm for northern Indiana region, is to have the average over the life of the contract. But again, that is obviously your choice. I set it up so you could choose whether you wanted recycle bi-weekly in increments or the average.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you for explaining that.
One follow-up question. And Mr. Lunch, Chris, it doesn't matter to me who answers this, but let's talk about the fuel fee and the embedding of the fuel fee in this rate, or I guess I'll ask it in the form of a question. My understanding is that the fuel that is associated with the trucks that are going to be providing recycling and waste pickup and removal, that is built into these rates that we have in front of us, correct? But that we anticipate that the final contract form will
Yes.
reflect a provision that will allow WM, if they're awarded this contract, to, on a yearly basis, ask the city to consider a readjustment of the fees that are in front of us this evening based upon the case that they make with regard to fuel costs. Is that also correct?
That is correct. They have to make a case
Okay.
for us to open it up.
And would it not be the case that once WN makes that case to the administration would then have to come to the council and ask for formal council approval to increase that rate? I'll change that from a
I
question.
believe
I'll change
so.
that from a question
No,
to
no,
a
no,
statement.
yes.
I believe
It
so.
would be my expectation that that would be embedded in this
Yes.
contract, that any change to this rate would have to come before this body as the fiscal body for the city to be approved, rather than it to be handled administratively.
I believe that's the case.
Thank you.
I did want to, Matt Lynch, 100 Lincoln Way West, I did want to say to you, related to the rates, it really, it's not, the rates, or whether we pick the average or the incremental, or President Nixon Ball, we had a conversation, maybe we use a 3-year sort of quartile average. I mean, the bottom line is this: it's not whether or not it's going to make the lives of the staff or the city easier. It's what's best in the best interest of our residents, period. I know that's a short time for me to come up and say that, but I think it's really important that we say that, because it's true. It's not about what's the most convenient for us, but what's in the best interest of our residents. And that is truly for you to work with us and WM to decide. All right?
Well said, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lunch? Mr. Mamalante?
Not necessarily a question for Mr. Lunch, but just more of a clarifying comment. I think it's important for the citizens to know, they're used to paying, and if I heard Ms. Jamrose correctly, currently our residents are paying $15.66 per month. Is that correct?
I believe, yes.
Correct. So I think that might have some shell shock when they go from $15.66 to $21.69. I think it's just important to note that our current contract with our current provider has ended, and they submitted a new proposal as well, which is $6. Well, if we're at $21.69 with WM, our current supplier is at $27.28. So I just don't want residents to think, all right, I'm paying, my price is going from $15.66 to $21.69, but everybody that submitted a contract or a price has gone up considerably from the $15.66.
And Mr. Mamalati, so that what's been talked about today a lot is education. So, I mean, to the point that we can, we'll make sure that that message is delivered. And no matter, the bottom line is, no matter how you slice it here, and obviously we're going with the lowest, most responsible bidder, that the price is going to go up no matter what. But with choosing WM, it will go up the least amount.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, but in addition to that, I think from what we've heard, what we've seen in the investigation we've done, we think that the customer service and the dependability and the quality will also be superior.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council at this point? Thank you, sir. Anything else from the administration? Mr. Viola, do you still want your opportunity to pepper Mr. Ryan with some questions?
Well, not pepper, I just had a quick question for Tim.
I prefer peppering him with questions.
We
but go ahead.
could salt and pepper this thing. And I'm not sure if it's Tim that would address this or Chris, so,
You want Chris to stand
well,
next to me?
well, who gets, I know we get phone calls when the trash is missed, as Lacey and Woody have all stated, they've heard things complain. In the city, who gets the complaints from the residents? Is it
We do.
Central Services?
Central Services gets all the complaints.
Chris,
We
okay.
have email lists that we have that send out to all the supervisors in the area to get the problems taken care of. The concept of what we're trying to do is get that away from us, because being a middleman, dealing with an industry that we know nothing about and have no control over does not work.
So my question to you then, Tim, would be, what have you not heard tonight that you hear all the time? Is there something that you hear all the time from our citizens that we have not asked WM while we're
The
here?
one question that we get a lot is special accommodations for homebound or handicapped people. If that company is willing to come up to the door to get the trash can and things like that, that is becoming more prevalent in Mishawaka. As you know, Mishawaka is kind of an aging community with the older neighborhoods and whatnot. That comes up quite a bit on phone calls that we get, what help they can get to get their trash to the road. What you find is a lot of these residents, elderly residents, don't have family that live within the area to give them a hand. That was going to be one of my questions when we sit down. Well, the next time they sit down, I want to be involved. That was the big one that came up in my mind. Everything else sounds in line or further bettering the trash pickup we currently have with the mobile access, with the internet access, with a call center. Again, I can't answer for a company I don't work for. I've been trying to do it since 2008, and it's darn near impossible.
Can you tell me or tell us what was the answer when you asked Republic about helping the elderly or the homebound or the sick?
They've made arrangements.
With, free of cost or free of charge?
As far as I
should-
know. The thing that put us in a conundrum with our current provider is, since we were paying the bill for the entire city, the residents didn't have access to the 800 number. If they would call the 800 number, they'd say, well, we don't do your billing, so we're not going to help you. This, I hope, alleviates all that. So that's why we kind of took it on, to try to play the middle role and, you know, totally tick people off because they've already talked to one, and then you got to send it out. And again, I don't have control over that truck to go back to that house and pick up that trash. This hopefully eliminates a lot of that issue.
Is WM willing to follow that same procedure?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, the specifications were written. I've looked through the specifications, pretty much standard. What we have currently is in that contract, as well as Matt addressed alley pickups. Those were part of it too. There are some areas that still have alley pickup because of congestion. I see no changes in the routes or how the pickup is. I see changes for the better for the customer service with what we've gotten, what we're going to eventually get.
Okay, thanks. That's all the pepper I have, so that's all I can do.
My smart alecky comments aside, Mr. Viola, those were really good questions. Well done. Mr. Mammolenti.
Thank you. After Mr. Violi puts pepper, I'll put a little sugar on it for you. So I know I've said it to you in person, but I want to take this opportunity publicly. Thank you for the couple week stretch that we had some issues in my area with our current supplier. Doesn't matter what time of the day, what day of the week it was, I'd send you a text and you'd always quickly respond. And I just want to appreciate, let you know how much I appreciate it and how much our residents appreciated your prompt
thank you.
response. Didn't have a solution every time, as you explained, because it was out of your control. But when I sent you a text, I knew that you were at least making an effort, so I wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hazen.
I would like to add that I know your department takes a ton of calls for trash. I mean,
I would say 80% of what we get in is trash calls.
yes, all the time. So if this company can alleviate that and help you guys so that you guys can get on to other things as well instead of having to take trash, I'm very hopeful that that will be the case, but I want to thank you guys because I worked with you for a lot of years and you guys were
Yeah,
phenomenal.
I'm kind of a creature of habits, but this, moving forward with a new vendor and provider for our trash, I'm looking forward to it. You know, we take everything into consideration when Chris sat down and did the specs, and I fed her information that I had, and I think it'll work out fine.
And I would echo those comments. You've done a great job, and Central Services, as well as the staff and MMU who have fielded calls. Everybody in the city has done a great job, but Mrs. Hazen said it well. This change opens the door for us to be able to provide better service in other areas if we're not tied down answering the phone with regard to questions that can only be answered by the trash
Correct.
vendor. So thank you for the work that you and everybody who reports to you have done.
Thank you.
Anything else for Mr. Ryan? Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, I just had one comment. Thank you again,
Sure.
Tim, for bringing that up about the.
Mr. Carroll, did you have something more?
No, he's talking.
Can't hear him.
Matt, go ahead.
I don't know if you can hear me on my connection. Are you able to hear?
Now we
Yeah.
can.
I just wanted to echo, thank you for bringing that up again, Tim, about those unique areas and advocating for unique solutions for that, because there are just certain areas in the district where curbside pickup just isn't the best option. So thank you. I look forward to following up on those solutions.
Thank you, sir. Any other final comments from the council? Anything else from the administration or WM? Then let me conclude by once again thanking everybody for the information that's been shared this evening, both those of you who are present and those who have participated remotely. We appreciate it. At this time, we'll go ahead and conclude this informational session. This matter will appear on a future council agenda, and the timing of that will be dependent upon when the council is presented with a contract that reflects what we have discussed here and what WM has proposed in their response to the RFP. So we look forward to the receipt of that as soon as is practicable. But again, thank you for your attendance here this evening, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, folks.